Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the epic, dramatic, and honestly, highly contradictory rise and fall of one of history's most polarizing figures, Napoleon Bonaparte. We're going to map out a journey that spans from incredible, sweeping military conquests all the way to a completely devastating collapse. By looking at the hard facts we've pulled together, we'll see both the promise and the absolute peril of unchecked ambition. So let's kick things off with a massive historical puzzle. How exactly does a kid born on a tiny, rocky Mediterranean island end up making the crowned heads of Europe literally tremble? How do we get from a completely disorganized, fractured nation to one man establishing a massive continental empire? Well, to understand his incredible trajectory, we really have to go back to 1789, right into the blood and fire of the French Revolution. This was a time of immense social turmoil and severe economic uncertainty. The centuries-old monarchy was being violently overthrown, and the streets of Paris were quite literally burning with this dangerous new idea that ordinary men actually deserved to hold power. So France was fighting a bloody civil war internally, while constantly at war with its European neighbors who desperately wanted to crush these revolutionary ideals. And you know what that does? It creates the perfect chaotic vacuum for a completely new kind of leader to emerge. Part 1. An outsider's meteoric rise. Young Napoleon grew up in Corsica speaking Italian, and he definitely felt like a complete outsider. When he managed to secure a scholarship to a prestigious French military academy at just 9 years old, he was constantly mocked by his wealthy, aristocratic peers. They made fun of his thick accent, his minor nobility status, and his family's severe financial turmoil after his father died. But how did he respond to being the outcast? He simply outworked everyone. He totally ignored the laughter, hunched over his military maps, and absolutely excelled in mathematics and artillery strategy. He essentially used that deep isolation to forge a brilliant military mind. Now, because the revolution caused so many aristocratic commanders to either flee or face the guillotine, the military ranks suddenly opened up for anyone with actual merit. At just 24 years old, back in 1793, he orchestrated this brilliant artillery assault to recapture the port city of Toulon from British and Royalist forces. That earned him an immediate promotion to brigadier general. Fast forward just 6 years through a series of stunning victories, and by 1799, with France totally exhausted from political instability, he seized his moment. He successfully staged a coup against the French government, establishing himself as the first consul of France at the incredibly young age of 30. Part 2. The Emperor's Apex. This crucial turning point is perfectly captured by his absolutely audacious coronation at Notre Dame Cathedral in 1804. For centuries, European monarchs claimed a divine right to rule. They would traditionally wait for the Pope to bestow the crown upon them. But Napoleon, he completely flipped the script. During this grand ceremony, he actually took the crown directly from the hands of Pope Pius VII and placed it on his own head. This unmistakably signaled that his authority didn't come from divine right at all. It stemmed entirely from his own achievements and merit. He bowed to absolutely no one. But hey, his absolute peak wasn't just about military might or crowning himself. He instituted massive civil reforms across the board. Most famously, he created the Napoleonic Code in 1804. This abolished traditional feudal laws, established equality for all citizens before the law, and secularized the state. He also laid the groundwork for modern French education by creating comprehensive public schools. And this is incredibly relevant to us right now, because his civil laws still actively shape the legal foundations in places ranging from modern France and Belgium all the way across the globe to Quebec and Louisiana today. He literally reshaped the very fabric of society. Which brings us to Part 3, the Russian catastrophe. Every epic story has that tipping point of catastrophic hubris, right? To really grasp the terrifying scale of his overreach here, we have to talk about a massive, record-breaking number, 600,000. That was the size of the Grand Army he marched into Russia in 1812, aiming to force them back into his European economic blockade. It was the largest army ever assembled in European history up to that point. He fully expected a quick campaign, a decisive battle, and an immediate Russian submission. But he got absolutely none of that. Instead of fighting, the Russians employed a brilliantly brutal three-step strategy. Step 1, they simply refused to engage in a decisive battle. Step 2, they continuously retreated deeper into their own country, executing a scorched earth policy. They literally burned their own land and cities, including setting Moscow on fire, just so the French forces would have no food or supplies. In Step 3, they just waited. They waited for the deadly -30-degree winter to arrive.
Napoleon sat in Moscow for a whole month waiting for a surrender that just never came. And then, that devastating cold set in.
The reality was a complete gut punch. The overwhelming majority of the supposedly invincible army was just wiped out. Out of those 600,000 men, less than 100,000 survived the catastrophic retreat. Over 500,000 men perished from starvation, froze in their sleep, or were captured. This one singular, disastrous campaign completely shattered Napoleon's aura of military perfection. He had survived every battle, but he absolutely could not survive Russia.
Part 4. The 100 Days to Waterloo.
So, with his army destroyed, a coalition of Prussia, Austria, Russia, and Britain marched straight on France. In April 1814, he was forced to abdicate and was exiled to the tiny Mediterranean island of Elba. But amazingly, and you really can't make this up, in February 1815, he manages this unbelievable escape with just 1,000 soldiers. He sails back to France, where the very enemy regiments sent to arrest him actually ended up joining him. This kicked off the famous 100 Days, where he reclaimed the throne. But the world was ready for him this time. In June 1815, his invasion of Belgium culminated in a permanent crushing defeat by British and Prussian forces at the fiercely contested Battle of Waterloo.
This time around, the British made absolutely sure there was no escaping. The man who had once conquered an entire continent spent his final 6 years completely isolated on St. Helena. We're talking about a rocky island in the remote South Atlantic, 1,200 miles from the nearest piece of land. He spent his days out there writing his autobiography, basically a mere shadow of his former self, eventually passing away at just 51 years old. It really brings his life story perfectly and tragically full circle.
Part 5. A complex, enduring legacy. When you lay all the facts out side by side, we're really left with a stark duality. On one hand, you've got the visionary reformer, a champion of meritocracy who tore down feudal privilege and created lasting civil laws in public schools that literally formed the bedrock of modern institutions. But on the other hand, we have the autocratic tyrant, an absolute ruler who seized power, crowned himself emperor, and relentlessly waged wars fueled by unchecked ambition, resulting in the catastrophic loss of 5 million lives. He was a modernizer and a warmonger all at once, a perfect historical paradox. And I think this famous quote perfectly captures the relentless drive of the man we've been examining. Impossible is a word found only in the dictionary of fools. It is the ultimate statement of a mocked outsider who just absolutely refused to accept any limits on his ambition or on what he could achieve, for better or for worse. Since the civil, legal, and educational world he helped build is quite literally the one we still walk in today, it leaves us with this final thought. What other incredible historical ripples are out there, just waiting to be explored? Keep digging into these fascinating pasts, and we'll see you in the next explainer.